Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Jean Grey, Emma Frost and Storm? If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. The aftermath of the Fourth Great Ninja War had left the world forever changed. Peace, hard-won and fragile, was beginning to take root in the elemental nations. Naruto Uzumaki, now hailed as a hero, felt a strange sense of unease despite the calm. He had spent so long fighting for peace that he didn't quite know what to do with himself now that it was achieved. One evening, as Naruto was walking through the quiet streets of Konoha, a strange and powerful energy rippled through the air. The sky above him seemed to twist and warp, and before he could react, a portal opened up in front of him. Bright, swirling energy crackled from the portal's edges, pulling Naruto towards it with an irresistible force. "What's going on?" Naruto yelled, trying to resist the pull, but it was no use. The force was too strong. In a flash, the world around him disappeared, replaced by a sensation of being stretched and compressed all at once. When the disorienting sensation finally subsided, Naruto found himself lying on the ground, staring up at an unfamiliar sky. The air smelled different, the sounds of the environment were foreign, and there was a strange hum of energy in the air that felt unlike anything he had ever sensed before. Slowly, he sat up, taking in his surroundings. He was in the middle of a large courtyard, surrounded by an imposing Gothic-style building. The place was eerily silent, save for the distant rustle of leaves and the faint chirping of birds. He instinctively reached for the kunai in his pouch, but before he could gather his bearings, he heard footsteps approaching. "Who the heck are you?" a voice called out, sharp and suspicious. Naruto spun around to face the source of the voice. A group of people stood at the edge of the courtyard, all wearing strange uniforms. The one who spoke was a young woman with red hair and intense green eyes that glowed with an unsettling power. Beside her was a tall, statuesque woman with dark skin and white hair, her eyes cold and watchful. The third person was a blonde woman, her gaze piercing and calculating, as if she was sizing Naruto up. "I could ask you the same thing," Naruto replied, trying to make sense of the situation. "Where am I? And who are you people?" The red-haired woman narrowed her eyes. "You're at the Xavier Institute, and I'm Jean Grey. But that's not the question here. The question is, how did you get past our defenses?" Naruto blinked in confusion. "Xavier Institute? I don't know what you're talking about. One minute I was in Konoha, and the next thing I know, I'm here." "Konoha?" The blonde woman, who seemed to have been listening quietly until now, stepped forward. "Never heard of it. But more importantly, you're not from around here, are you?" She looked at him like she was trying to read his mind. Naruto frowned. "No, I'm not. I got sucked into some kind of portal and ended up here. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not looking for a fight." The tall woman with white hair, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was calm and commanding. "If what you say is true, then you are indeed far from home. My name is Aurora Monroe, though most call me Storm. These are Jean Grey and Emma Frost. We are members of the X-Men, a group dedicated to protecting both humans and mutants." "Mutants?" Naruto repeated, the word unfamiliar to him. "What's that?" Jean, sensing the confusion in his voice, softened her tone slightly. "Mutants are people born with special powers, like me. And it seems like you have some powers of your own." "Yeah, you could say that," Naruto admitted, scratching the back of his head. "But I'm not a mutant. I'm a ninja from the Hidden Leaf Village. We use chakra to do all sorts of things, like ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Chakra? Now that's interesting. But it doesn't explain how you got here." Naruto sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wish I knew. This isn't the first time I've been sucked into some weird dimension, though. Usually, there's some reason for it. Maybe there's something I'm supposed to do here." "Or someone," Storm added thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing slightly. "There are forces in this world that would seek to use someone with your power, Naruto. Until we understand more, it might be wise for you to stay with us. The Xavier Institute is a safe place for those with extraordinary abilities." Naruto nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "Thanks, that sounds like a good idea. I don't really have anywhere else to go right now, anyway. But you're going to have to fill me in on what's going on in this world." Jean smiled, her earlier suspicion fading slightly. "We can do that. But first, let's get you settled in. There's a lot you'll need to learn about this world and fast." As they led Naruto into the mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that his arrival here was no accident. The energy in this world was different, almost volatile, and he knew from experience that it usually meant trouble. But for now, he would have to trust these new allies and figure out what role he was meant to play in this strange new world. The Xavier Institute was like nothing Naruto had ever seen before. As he walked through the halls, he marveled at the combination of modern technology and old-world architecture. It was a strange mix, but it seemed to work, creating a space that felt both advanced and steeped in history. The students he passed by looked at him curiously, whispering among themselves, but none approached. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little out of place. Storm led him to a large ornate door and pushed it open, revealing a spacious office. Seated behind the desk was a man with a calm, yet commanding presence. His bald head and kind eyes immediately drew Naruto's attention. Professor Xavier, Storm greeted, her voice warm with respect. "This is Naruto Uzumaki, the young man who appeared in the courtyard." "Ah, yes. Welcome, Naruto," Professor Xavier said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I've heard much about your sudden arrival. Please, have a seat." Naruto nodded and sat down, feeling a little awkward under the professor's intense gaze. "Thanks. So, you're the guy in charge here?" In a manner of speaking, yes, Xavier replied with a slight smile. "I run this institute as a place of learning and safety for mutants, people with extraordinary abilities. Storm and the others have told me a bit about your situation. It seems you're from another world, one where chakra and ninjas exist." "Yeah, that's right," Naruto confirmed. "Back home, I'm a ninja, and we use chakra to fight and protect our villages. But I've never seen anything like the powers you guys have here. What exactly is a mutant?" "A mutant," Xavier began, leaning forward slightly, "is someone who is born with a genetic mutation that grants them unique abilities. These abilities can manifest in many different forms, from telepathy and telekinesis to control over the elements. We are still learning the full extent of mutant abilities, but our goal here is to help young mutants understand and control their powers, while also teaching them to coexist with the rest of humanity." Naruto frowned, absorbing this information. "So, you help people control their powers and live in peace. That's a good thing. But from what I've seen, not everyone seems to like mutants." "That is, unfortunately, true," Xavier admitted, his expression somber. "There is a great deal of fear and mistrust toward mutants, often fueled by ignorance or prejudice. It is a challenge we face every day." Naruto nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. Back home, people used to fear me because of the 9 tails sealed inside me. It took a long time for them to see me for who I really am. But I'm here now, and if I can help, I will." Xavier smiled at Naruto's resolve. "That is a noble sentiment, Naruto. We could use someone with your spirit and strength. For now, why don't you rest and take some time to familiarize yourself with the institute? Jean, Storm, and Emma will help you get settled. We'll figure out the next steps once you've had a chance to acclimate." "Thanks, Professor," Naruto said, standing up. "I appreciate it." As he left Xavier's office, Naruto felt a sense of purpose beginning to take shape. This world was different, but the challenges it faced were not unlike those he had dealt with before. Protecting people, helping them understand each other, that was something he knew how to do. Over the next few days, Naruto began to integrate into life at the Xavier Institute. He joined the X-Men in their training sessions, quickly proving his worth as a fighter. His agility, reflexes, and unique abilities surprised many of the mutants, especially when they saw how easily he could keep up with them. Jean Grey, who had been wary of Naruto at first, started to warm up to him as they trained together. She was impressed by his strength and determination, qualities she admired. They often sparred together, with Naruto teaching her some basic taijutsu moves while she showed him how to harness his chakra in new ways. Their training sessions were intense, but they also allowed them to build a rapport, and a genuine friendship began to blossom between them. Emma Frost, on the other hand, remained distant and aloof. She watched Naruto closely, her icy demeanor never wavering. Although she couldn't deny his potential, she still wasn't entirely convinced of his intentions. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense that Naruto was being honest, but there was something about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Despite her reservations, she couldn't help but feel intrigued by this strange newcomer. Storm, true to her nature, took on a more mentoring role. She spent time with Naruto, guiding him in understanding the world they lived in. She admired his resilience and saw in him the potential to be a great leader. They often had long conversations about the responsibilities of leadership, something both of them had experienced in their respective worlds. Storm's calm and wise presence became a source of comfort for Naruto, who found himself opening up to her about his past and the burdens he carried. One evening, after an exhausting day of training, Naruto found himself on the roof of the mansion, looking out at the sprawling grounds. The night was quiet, with only the soft rustle of the trees in the breeze. He was lost in thought when he heard footsteps behind him. "You're quite the mystery, aren't you?" Emma's voice was cool, but there was a hint of curiosity in it. Naruto turned to face her, noticing the way the moonlight highlighted her striking features. "I'm just a guy trying to find his way in a new world," he replied, shrugging. "Nothing mysterious about that." Emma walked closer, her gaze never leaving his. "You've adapted surprisingly well, considering you're from a completely different dimension. Most people would be overwhelmed, yet here you are, fitting in as if you've always belonged." Naruto smiled faintly. I've been through a lot, seen a lot of different things. After a while, you just learn to roll with it. Besides, I'm used to being in weird situations. Emma studied him for a moment, as if weighing her next words carefully. I've looked into your mind, you know. Seen some of the things you've been through. Your world is brutal, to say the least. Naruto's expression hardened slightly. Yeah, it is. But I survived, and I'm stronger because of it. Whatever you saw, it's in the past. I'm focused on what's in front of me now. Emma nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. You're right. The past is the past. But it still shapes who we are. You've been shaped by your experiences, and they've made you someone worth watching. Naruto chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. As you should, Emma replied, her tone lightening slightly. But don't think I'm letting my guard down just yet. There's still a lot we don't know about you. That's fair, Naruto said. But I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to help. Emma looked at him for a long moment before finally nodding. Then maybe we can start by learning to trust each other. Naruto smiled. I'd like that. As Emma turned to leave, Naruto felt a strange sense of anticipation. He had come to this world by accident, but he was beginning to realize that maybe there was a reason he was here. With new friends by his side and new challenges ahead, Naruto knew that his journey in this world was just beginning. The days at the Xavier Institute passed quickly for Naruto as he continued to train and integrate himself into the life of the X-Men. His days were filled with intense physical training, strategy sessions, and learning about the complexities of the world he now found himself in. Yet, despite his progress and the friendships he was forming, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was looming on the horizon. It was during one of these training sessions that things began to change. Naruto was sparring with Jean Grey in the Danger Room, the X-Men's high-tech training facility. The simulated environment around them shifted and adapted to their movements as they engaged in a fast-paced hand-to-hand combat exercise. Come on, Jean, you've got to keep your focus. Naruto called out as he dodged a telekinetic blast she sent his way. I'm trying. Jean replied, frustration lacing her voice. She threw another blast, this one more forceful, but Naruto deftly sidestepped it and closed the distance between them. You're thinking too much. Naruto said, catching her wrist and flipping her onto her back. Trust your instincts. Jean groaned, lying on the mat, staring up at the simulated sky of the Danger Room. I know. It's just I feel like something's off lately. Naruto extended a hand to help her up. What do you mean? Jean hesitated before accepting his hand and pulling herself to her feet. I don't know how to explain it. My powers have been different. Stronger, but also harder to control. It's like there's something inside me, something trying to get out. Naruto frowned, sensing the seriousness of her words. You're worried? Jean nodded. Yeah. I've been having these strange visions, too. Like flashes of a fire burning inside me, consuming everything around it. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen enough to know that these kinds of feelings were never to be taken lightly. Have you talked to Professor Xavier about it? I've tried, but he says it's something I need to work through myself. He's been helping me, but it's getting harder to keep it under control. Naruto's expression grew serious. If you ever need help, you know I'm here, right? I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Jean smiled, though it was strained. Thanks, Naruto. That means a lot. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the Danger Room. The environment around them flickered and then disappeared, replaced by the cold metal walls of the training facility. What's going on? Naruto asked, his senses immediately on high alert. Jean's face grew pale. That's the emergency alarm. Something's wrong. They quickly exited the Danger Room and made their way to the central command area, where the other X-Men were already gathering. Professor Xavier, Storm, and Emma Frost were clustered around a large monitor displaying a map with several red blips flashing ominously. Professor, what's happening? Jean asked as they approached. Xavier's expression was grave. There's been a surge in mutant activity across the city. Multiple reports of powers going out of control, incidents of destruction, it's chaos out there. What's causing it? Storm asked, her voice calm but tense. Xavier shook his head. I'm not certain, but it seems to be linked to a sudden spike in psychic energy. It's unlike anything I've seen before. I fear it may be related to the disturbances Jean has been experiencing. Jean's eyes widened in fear. You think it's me? I don't know for sure, Xavier replied, his tone gentle. But we need to find out. Jean, I need you to focus, to reach out with your mind and see if you can sense anything unusual. Jean nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she closed her eyes and focused. The room fell silent as they waited, the tension thick in the air. After a few moments, Jean's eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense fiery light. I can feel it. There's something inside me. It's growing stronger, and it's spreading out, affecting other mutants. Naruto felt a surge of protectiveness as he saw the fear in Jean's eyes. We need to stop it. Whatever it is, we can't let it hurt anyone else. Agreed, Xavier said. Jean, we'll need to contain this energy. I want you to stay here with me and Emma while we try to stabilize your powers. Storm, Naruto, I need you to monitor the situation outside and assist any mutants who are losing control of their abilities. Storm nodded, her expression determined. Understood. Come on, Naruto, let's move. Naruto hesitated for a moment, glancing at Jean, who was clearly struggling to keep her composure. Jean, you're going to be okay, right? Jean forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. I'll be fine. Just be careful out there. Naruto gave her a reassuring nod before following Storm out of the room. As they moved through the mansion's halls, he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had faced many powerful enemies before, but this felt different. This was someone he cared about, someone who was being torn apart from the inside by a force she couldn't control. Outside the mansion, the scene was chaotic. Several mutants had lost control of their abilities, causing destruction in the surrounding area. Storm immediately took charge, using her weather manipulation powers to contain the situation, while Naruto helped evacuate the civilians caught in the crossfire. But as they worked, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The energy in the air was thick and oppressive, and he could sense that something much darker was on the horizon. Back in the mansion, Jean sat in the center of the command room, surrounded by Professor Xavier and Emma Frost. Her eyes were closed, and her body was tense as she struggled to keep the Phoenix Force, a powerful and dangerous cosmic entity that had been lying dormant within her, under control. Emma, her face unreadable, reached out with her telepathic powers to try and assist Jean in containing the force within her. But as she delved deeper into Jean's mind, she was met with an overwhelming surge of power that nearly knocked her back. This is more than just a psychic disturbance, Emma said, her voice strained. It's a force of nature, raw and uncontrollable. We're dealing with the Phoenix Force. Xavier's expression darkened. I feared as much. We must act quickly before it consumes Jean completely. Jean's eyes snapped open, and the room was bathed in an intense fiery light. I can't hold it back. It's too strong. Just as Jean's control began to slip, Naruto burst back into the room, his eyes wide with determination. Without hesitation, he rushed to Jean's side, placing his hands on her shoulders. Jean, listen to me. Naruto shouted over the roar of the energy swirling around them. You're stronger than this. I know you are. You just need to focus. Jean's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the chaotic energy around her seemed to calm. Naruto could feel the raw power of the Phoenix Force pushing against him, but he refused to back down. Remember who you are. Naruto continued, his voice firm. You're Jean Grey, one of the strongest people I know. You're not alone in this. Jean's eyes flickered with recognition, and she nodded, her resolve hardening. With Naruto's support, she managed to regain some semblance of control over the Phoenix Force, the fiery light around her dimming slightly. But Naruto knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The Phoenix Force was still there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when Jean's control would slip again. We'll get through this, Naruto promised, his voice low but resolute. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Jean's eyes softened, and she gave him a small grateful smile. Thank you, Naruto. I don't know what I'd do without you. Emma, who had been watching the exchange with a calculating gaze, finally spoke up. This isn't over. We need to find a way to permanently contain the Phoenix Force before it consumes her completely. Xavier nodded in agreement. Indeed. For now, Jean, you must remain here under close observation. Naruto, your presence seems to have a calming effect on her. I would ask that you stay with her as much as possible. Naruto nodded. Of course. I'm not going anywhere. As the immediate crisis passed, the X-Men regrouped, but the sense of unease lingered. The Phoenix Force was a powerful and unpredictable entity, and they all knew that the battle to contain it was far from over. And as Naruto stood by Jean's side, he couldn't shake the feeling that his role in this world was only just beginning. The atmosphere at the Xavier Institute was tense in the days following Jean's near loss of control. The Phoenix Force was a topic of whispered conversations and worried glances among the students and faculty alike. Despite the outward calm, the danger simmered just beneath the surface, like a storm waiting to break. Naruto spent most of his time with Jean, as Professor Xavier had requested. He was there during her training sessions, helping her focus her mind and control her powers, and he stayed with her during quiet moments, offering support and reassurance. The bond between them grew stronger, a connection forged in the heat of adversity. But not everyone was content to simply wait and see what happened next. Emma Frost watched Naruto closely, her mind a whirl of conflicting thoughts. She had always prided herself on her ability to read people, to understand their motivations and predict their actions. But Naruto was different. He was an enigma, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Emma found herself drawn to Naruto. She approached him as he was leaving the danger room, her footsteps light and her expression unreadable. "Naruto," she called, her voice cool and composed. Naruto turned to face her, surprised to see her standing there alone. "Emma. What's up?" Emma hesitated for a moment, something she rarely did. "I need to speak with you. Privately." Naruto's curiosity was piqued, but he nodded and followed her as she led him to a quieter part of the mansion. They ended up in one of the smaller sitting rooms, the door closing softly behind them. Emma turned to face Naruto, her eyes sharp and probing. "There's something I need to know, Naruto. Something that's been bothering me ever since you arrived." Naruto leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. "Okay. Ask away." Emma took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "When you first arrived here, I looked into your mind. I saw glimpses of your past, your world and the power you hold inside you. The 9 tails, as you call it. But there's more to you than just that, isn't there?" Naruto's expression darkened slightly. "The 9 tails is a part of me, but it doesn't define me. I've learned to control its power, to use it for good. But yeah, there's a lot more to me than just the fox." Emma studied him, her mind reaching out to gently probe his thoughts. "You've been through a lot. More than most people could ever imagine. And yet, you carry it all with such grace. Such determination. It's almost unnatural." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at, Emma?" Emma's gaze softened, and for the first time, Naruto saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes. "I want to understand you, Naruto. I want to know what drives you, what keeps you going after everything you've been through. And I want to know if I can trust you." Naruto was silent for a moment, considering her words. He had grown used to people questioning him, doubting his intentions, but there was something different about Emma's approach. She wasn't trying to judge him, she was trying to understand him. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady. "I've been through hell and back, Emma. I've lost people I cared about, fought battles I didn't think I could win, and carried burdens that would break most people. But I'm still here because I have something worth fighting for. I fight for my friends, for the people I care about. I fight for a better world, one where people don't have to suffer like I did." Emma listened intently, her mind absorbing his words. "And now? What are you fighting for here?" Naruto's gaze was unwavering. "I'm fighting for the same thing. To protect the people I care about. To make sure Jean doesn't lose herself to the Phoenix Force. To make sure this world doesn't fall into chaos." Emma nodded slowly, her mind processing everything he had said. "I see. And what if it comes down to a choice? What if you have to choose between saving Jean and saving this world?" Naruto's expression hardened. "I won't let it come to that. I'll find a way to save both." Emma couldn't help but admire his resolve. There was no hesitation in his words, no doubt. He truly believed that he could find a way to save everyone, even when faced with impossible odds. For the first time, Emma felt a genuine connection to Naruto, something she hadn't expected. She had always kept herself distant from others, using her telepathic abilities as a shield to protect her from the pain of loss and betrayal. But with Naruto, there was a sense of honesty, a rawness that she found refreshing. "Thank you, Naruto," Emma said quietly, her voice softer than usual. "I think I understand you a little better now." Naruto smiled, the tension between them easing. "Good. I want us to be on the same side, Emma. We're stronger together." Emma nodded, and for a moment, the icy wall she had built around herself seemed to melt away. "Yes, we are." As they left the sitting room and rejoined the others, Emma couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. For so long, she had been the one to observe and be pies, to keep others at arm's length. But now, she found herself wanting to trust Naruto, to believe in his ability to protect them all. Yet, even as she began to lower her defenses, a part of her remained cautious. The Phoenix Force was still a threat, and Jean's struggle was far from over. Emma knew that the road ahead would be difficult and that they would all need to be prepared for whatever was to come. As the days passed, Emma and Naruto continued to grow closer, their conversations becoming more frequent and more personal. Emma found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else, sharing her fears, her doubts, and even her hopes for the future. And in return, Naruto shared his own experiences, his own struggles, and his unwavering determination to protect those he cared about. Their relationship became one of mutual respect and understanding, a bond that neither of them had expected, but both had come to value. But as their connection deepened, so too did the tension within the mansion. Jean's powers continued to fluctuate, the Phoenix Force growing stronger with each passing day. The other X-Men could sense the danger, and even the students began to feel the strain. One evening, as Naruto sat with Jean in her room, trying to help her meditate and focus her mind, the Phoenix Force flared up once again. Jean's eyes snapped open, glowing with a fiery intensity as the room around them began to shake. "Jean!" Naruto shouted, grabbing her shoulders. "You have to stay with me. Don't let it take over." Jean's voice was strained, her body trembling as she fought to maintain control. I can't hold it back. It's too strong." Naruto's heart pounded in his chest as he poured his chakra into her, trying to stabilize the raging energy inside her. He could feel the Phoenix Force pushing against him, trying to break free, but he refused to back down. "Remember what we talked about, Gene," Naruto urged, his voice firm. "You're stronger than this. You can control it." For a moment, it seemed as though Gene might lose the battle. The energy swirling around them grew more intense, the walls of the room cracking under the pressure. But then, something shifted. Gene's eyes met Naruto's, and she found the strength she needed. With a final burst of effort, Gene pushed the Phoenix Force back, the fiery glow in her eyes fading as the room fell silent once more. Naruto let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief flooding through him. "You did it, Gene. You're okay." Gene slumped against him, exhausted but victorious. "Thank you, Naruto. I don't know what I'd do without you." Naruto smiled, holding her close. "You're never alone, Gene. We'll get through this together." As they sat there, catching their breath, Emma entered the room, her expression a mix of concern and admiration. She had felt the surge of energy from across the mansion and had rushed to their side, only to find that Naruto had once again helped Gene regain control. "You really are something," Naruto Emma said, her voice tinged with respect. "Not many people could do what you just did." Naruto shrugged, a humble smile on his face. "I'm just doing what I can to help." Emma's gaze softened, and she nodded. "And you're doing it well. But we're going to need more than just your strength to deal with what's coming. We all need to be ready." Naruto's expression grew serious as he looked at both Gene and Emma. "We will be. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." And as the night settled over the Xavier Institute, the three of them knew that the real battle was only just beginning. The following morning, the tension at the Xavier Institute was palpable. Gene had managed to control the Phoenix Force for now, but the threat of it overwhelming her loomed large in everyone's mind. While Naruto and Emma worked closely with Gene to help her maintain control, another figure had been quietly observing Naruto's progress and struggle: Storm, the regal and wise leader who commanded the very forces of nature. Aurora Monroe, known as Storm, had always been a mentor and a guide to the younger mutants at the Institute. Her ability to command the weather was only matched by her calm demeanor and wisdom, qualities that had earned her the respect and admiration of her peers. She had seen the way Naruto had thrown himself into the fray, not just physically but emotionally, as he became more involved in Gene's struggles. She knew all too well the toll that such responsibility could take on a person, especially someone as young as Naruto. One afternoon, after another grueling training session with Gene, Naruto stepped outside to catch his breath. The cool breeze against his skin was a welcome relief, and he closed his eyes, letting the wind wash over him. Taking a moment to breathe. Storm's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of authority and concern. Naruto opened his eyes to see Storm standing nearby, her white hair flowing gently in the wind. "Yeah," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "It's been a long day." Storm walked over to stand beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You've taken on a great deal since you arrived here, Naruto. More than most would be able to handle." Naruto shrugged, though there was a heaviness in his expression. "I've been through a lot before. This it's different, but I'll manage." Storm turned to look at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "I've seen many young people like you, Naruto. Strong, brave, and determined to protect those they care about. But I've also seen the burden that comes with that kind of responsibility. It can be overwhelming, even for the strongest of us." Naruto's expression softened as he listened to her words. "I don't really have a choice. Gene needs me, and I can't let her down." Storm agreed, her voice gentle. "But you must also take care of yourself. There's a balance that must be maintained, especially when dealing with forces as powerful as the Phoenix. If you push yourself too hard, you risk losing sight of that balance." Naruto was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. He had always been the type to throw himself into whatever challenge lay before him, but he hadn't considered the toll it might take on him in the long run. "I guess I've been so focused on helping Gene that I haven't really thought about how this is affecting me." Storm nodded. "It's easy to lose yourself in the struggle when you care so deeply about others. But remember, Naruto, you are just as important in this fight as Gene. You are not alone, and you don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Naruto looked up at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Thanks, Storm. I guess I needed to hear that." Storm placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but reassuring. "You're doing well, Naruto. You've brought hope to Gene and to all of us. But don't be afraid to lean on others when you need to. We're all in this together." Naruto nodded, feeling a sense of comfort in her words. He had always been the one others relied on, but it was a relief to know that there were people here who he could rely on as well. Storm said, gesturing toward the open field beyond the mansion. "Let's take a walk. I find that the fresh air and open skies help clear the mind." Naruto followed her lead, and the two of them walked in silence for a while, the peaceful surroundings providing a stark contrast to the tension that had filled the mansion. As they walked, Naruto found himself relaxing, the weight on his shoulders easing just a bit. "Back in my world," Naruto began, breaking the silence, "I was always fighting to protect my village, to make sure everyone was safe. It's what I've always done, and I guess I just brought that with me here. But this place, it's so different. The stakes are different." Storm nodded, understanding the depth of what he was saying. "The world you come from has shaped you, Naruto. It has made you strong, resilient, and compassionate. But this world has its own challenges, its own battles. And while you bring your strength and experience with you, you must also adapt to the new realities you face here." Naruto looked out over the horizon, the sun beginning to dip low in the sky. "I know. I want to do what's right. I want to protect everyone, but it feels like I'm always one step behind, like I'm not doing enough." Storm stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious but kind. "Naruto, the very fact that you care so deeply, that you are willing to sacrifice so much for others, is what makes you a true leader. But leadership is not just about fighting battles. It's about knowing when to fight and when to step back. It's about understanding that you can't do everything alone." Naruto met her gaze, her words sinking in. "You're right. I need to trust in the people around me, just like I expect them to trust in me." Storm smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened her usually stern features. "Exactly. And remember, Naruto, you have allies here. We all have different strengths, different roles to play. Lean on us, just as we lean on you." Naruto nodded, a sense of clarity settling over him. "I will. Thanks, Storm. You've given me a lot to think about." "You're welcome," Storm replied, her voice warm. "And if you ever need to talk, or if you just need a break, you know where to find me." They continued their walk, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. Naruto found himself enjoying Storm's company, her wisdom and calm demeanor, providing a much-needed counterbalance to the intensity of the situation with Jean. Over the next few days, Naruto took Storm's advice to heart. He began to delegate more, trusting the other X-Men to handle certain tasks, while he focused on helping Jean and managing his own mental and physical well-being. He also spent more time with Storm, learning from her experiences and gaining a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a leader. Storm, in turn, found herself growing increasingly fond of Naruto. His youthful energy and determination reminded her of herself when she was younger, and she admired the way he carried himself, despite the burdens he bore. Their relationship deepened, not just as mentor and student, but as equals who shared a mutual respect and understanding. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Naruto found himself on the roof of the mansion, the cool night air refreshing against his skin. He had come up here to clear his mind, as he often did, but tonight he wasn't alone. Storm joined him, her presence calming and steady. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice soft. Naruto shook his head. "Too much on my mind, I guess. But it helps." Storm nodded, looking out at the star-filled sky. "I often find solace in the night sky. It reminds me of the vastness of the world, of all the possibilities that lie ahead." Naruto smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. "Yeah, I get that. It's easy to feel small when you look at something so big. But it also makes you realize that there's always hope, always something to fight for." Storm glanced at him, a hint of pride in her eyes. "You've grown, Naruto. Since you've been here, I've watched you adapt, learn, and become stronger. You're not just a fighter, you're a leader." Naruto looked down, a little embarrassed by the praise. "I'm just doing my best." "And your best is more than enough," Storm replied, her voice firm. "Never doubt that." Naruto nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks, Storm. That means a lot, coming from you." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the night stretching out before them. There was still so much ahead, so many challenges to face, but in that moment, Naruto felt ready to take them on. With Storm's guidance, Jean's resilience, and the support of the X-Men, he knew they could overcome whatever came their way. As they turned to head back inside, Storm placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. "Remember, Naruto, you're not alone. We're all here for you." Naruto smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I know. And I'm here for you too." With that, they re-entered the mansion, leaving the peaceful night behind them. But the lessons learned and the bonds forged would stay with them, guiding them through the battles that lay ahead. The days at the Xavier Institute settled into a tense routine. Jean continued to battle the Phoenix Force with Naruto's support, while the other X-Men kept a vigilant eye on the situation. Despite the efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy, everyone could feel the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. And as it turned out, that storm would come in the form of one of the most powerful and dangerous mutants in the world. Magneto. Eric Lensher, known to the world as Magneto, was a name that struck fear and respect in equal measure. His belief in mutant superiority and his willingness to go to any lengths to achieve his goals had made him a formidable adversary. So, when rumors began to circulate that a new, incredibly powerful mutant had appeared at the Xavier Institute, it wasn't long before Magneto took notice. From his secret base, Magneto observed the Xavier Institute through various channels. The reports of Naruto's arrival and his remarkable abilities intrigued him. He had seen many powerful mutants in his time, but this Naruto was different. He wasn't from their world, yet his power was undeniable. Magneto saw in Naruto a potential ally, someone who could be swayed to his cause, or, failing that, a significant threat that needed to be neutralized. He decided to make his move. The infiltration. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Mystique, Magneto's trusted lieutenant, was a master of disguise and infiltration. Her ability to shapeshift into anyone she chose made her the perfect agent for this mission. Under Magneto's orders, she slipped into the Xavier Institute undetected, assuming the form of various students and staff members to gather information. Naruto, oblivious to the new threat, continued his routine of training with the X-Men and supporting Jean. But even as he focused on these tasks, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was a nagging sensation, a sixth sense honed from years of dealing with danger. He noticed small things, students who seemed to be acting strangely, unfamiliar faces in the hallways, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what was wrong. It wasn't until one afternoon, during a training session, that things came to a head. Naruto was sparring with Cyclops in the danger room, their movements fluid and precise as they tested each other's reflexes. Cyclops fired off a controlled beam of energy from his visor, which Naruto dodged with ease, flipping through the air and landing lightly on his feet. "Not bad, Cyclops," Naruto said with a grin. "But you've got to be quicker than that if you want to catch me." Cyclops smirked, raising his hand to adjust his visor. "Don't get too peepy, Naruto. I'm just getting started." But before the match could continue, the danger room's doors slid open and Jean hurried in, her expression urgent. "Naruto, Cyclops, we need you in the control room. Now." Naruto's grin faded as he saw the seriousness in Jean's eyes. He didn't need to be told twice. The three of them quickly exited the danger room and made their way to the control room, where Professor Xavier, Storm, and Emma were already gathered. "What's going on?" Naruto asked as they entered. Xavier's expression was grim. "We have a situation. I've just received word that Magneto's forces are on the move. We believe they're headed here." "Magneto?" Cyclops repeated, his fists clenching. "What does he want?" "Most likely, he's interested in Naruto," Emma said, her tone cold and matter-of-fact. "He's probably heard about your abilities and wants to either recruit you or eliminate you as a potential threat." Naruto frowned, his mind racing. "And how does he plan to do that?" Before anyone could answer, the alarms in the mansion blared to life, signaling an intruder. The X-Men sprang into action, moving swiftly to assess the threat. "It's Mystique," Storm said, her eyes narrowing as she checked the security feed. "She's already inside." "Damn it," Cyclops muttered. "She could be anyone." "Not for long," Naruto said, his voice steely with determination. "Let's go find her." The confrontation. The X-Men spread out through the mansion, searching for any sign of Mystique. Naruto moved quickly, his senses heightened as he scanned the hallways and rooms for anything out of the ordinary. He found her in the lower levels of the mansion, near the hangar bay where the X-Jet was stored. She was disguised as one of the younger students, but Naruto knew immediately that something was wrong. The students' movements were too deliberate, too purposeful. Naruto approached cautiously, his eyes narrowing as he closed the distance. "You're not supposed to be down here," he called out, his voice firm. The student turned to face him, her expression innocent and surprised. I got lost. I was just trying to find my way back." Naruto didn't buy it for a second. "Nice try, Mystique. But you'll have to do better than that." The student's expression shifted, melting away to reveal Mystique's true form. Her blue skin and yellow eyes were unmistakable, and she regarded Naruto with a mixture of amusement and calculation. "You're sharper than you look, Uzumaki," Mystique said, her voice smooth and unruffled. "But you're too late." Before Naruto could react, Mystique shifted again, this time taking on the appearance of Jean. The sight of her doppelganger gave Naruto only a moment's pause, but it was enough for Mystique to dart past him, heading deeper into the hangar bay. "Not so fast," Naruto shouted, giving chase. He pursued her through the winding corridors, his reflexes sharp as he navigated the twists and turns. Mystique was fast, but Naruto was faster, and he quickly closed the gap between them. Just as he was about to reach her, Mystique abruptly shifted into a new form, this time taking on Naruto's own appearance. The sudden change threw Naruto off, and she used the opportunity to gain some distance, ducking into a side room and locking the door behind her. Naruto skidded to a halt outside the door, frustration boiling over. "You can't hide from me, Mystique." He gathered his chakra, forming a Rasengan in his hand. With a powerful thrust, he slammed the swirling orb of energy into the door, shattering it and bursting into the room. But Mystique was ready. She had taken on yet another form, this time as Cyclops, and she fired a blast of energy from her fake visor, forcing Naruto to dodge at the last second. The blast struck the wall behind him, leaving a smoking crater in its wake. Naruto rolled to his feet, his eyes blazing with determination. "I'm done playing games, Mystique. You're not getting away." Mystique smirked, clearly enjoying the chase. "We'll see about that." But before she could make her next move, the real Cyclops and Jean arrived, flanking Naruto on either side. "Give it up," Mystique, Cyclops said, his voice hard. "You're outnumbered." Mystique's eyes darted between the three of them, weighing her options. She could shift into any form she wanted, but it wouldn't change the fact that she was cornered. After a tense moment, she sighed, her posture relaxing. "Very well," she said, her voice smooth as she shifted back into her true form. "I suppose there's no point in fighting. But know this, X-Men. Magneto is coming. And when he does, you'll wish you had taken my offer." But those ominous words, Mystique suddenly activated a device on her wrist and a blinding flash of light filled the room. Naruto and the others instinctively shielded their eyes, but by the time the light faded, Mystique was gone. Naruto cursed under his breath, his fists clenching. "Damn it. She got away." Cyclops laid a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his expression serious. "We'll deal with her next time. Right now, we need to prepare. If Magneto is on his way, we need to be ready." Jean nodded, her eyes full of concern. "We need to warn the professor and the others. This could be the fight of our lives." Preparing for battle. The X-Men regrouped in the command center, where Professor Xavier and Storm were already making preparations. The news of Mystique's infiltration and her warning about Magneto had set everyone on edge, and the mansion was abuzz with activity as the X-Men readied themselves for what was to come. Xavier's voice was calm but urgent as he addressed the team. "Magneto is one of the most powerful mutants in the world, and he will stop at nothing to achieve his goals. We must be prepared for anything." "We've dealt with Magneto before," Wolverine growled, his claws extending with a metallic snikt. "But if he's after Naruto, we need to make sure he doesn't get what he wants." Naruto, standing at the edge of the room, felt a surge of determination. He had faced powerful enemies before: Madara, Kagaya, and countless others, but this was different. Magneto was a force to be reckoned with, and the stakes were higher than ever. "I'm not going to let Magneto hurt anyone," Naruto said, his voice firm. "We'll stop him, no matter what." Storm stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We'll face him together, as a team. But we must be strategic. Magneto's powers give him control over metal, which means we need to avoid relying on anything he can manipulate." "Right," Cyclops agreed. "We'll need to use our non-metallic weapons and tactics. And we need to keep him away from Naruto. He's after you, Naruto, and we can't let him get to you." Naruto nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. "I can create clones to help spread out the fight, keep him off balance. And if he tries to attack from a distance, I've got plenty of jutsu to counter him." Xavier looked at Naruto with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Naruto, your bravery is commendable, but remember that Magneto is cunning and unpredictable. We must be prepared for anything." "I know," Naruto replied, his voice steady. "But I've faced worse, and I'm not about to back down now." As the X-Men continued to plan and prepare, the weight of the coming battle hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew that when Magneto arrived, it would be a fight unlike any they had faced before. But they were ready. And they would stand together, no matter what. The calm before the storm. Night fell over the Xavier Institute, but sleep was elusive for most of its residents. The knowledge that Magneto was on his way kept everyone on edge, and the mansion was filled with a quiet, tense energy. Naruto stood on the roof of the mansion, looking out at the night sky. The stars were bright, but they did little to ease the worry in his heart. He had faced many challenges in his life, but this felt different. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his new friends, for this world that had become his home. As he stood there, deep in thought, Storm joined him, her presence calm and steady as always. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice gentle. Naruto shook his head. "Too much on my mind. I keep thinking about what's coming, about what Magneto might do." Storm nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's natural to worry, Naruto. But remember, you're not alone in this. We're all standing with you." Naruto smiled, grateful for her words. "I know. And that's what gives me hope. We'll stop Magneto. We have to." Storm placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch reassuring. "We will. And whatever happens, we'll face it together." The two of them stood in silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin. There was a sense of calm between them, a shared understanding that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. But even as they found comfort in each other's presence, the shadow of Magneto loomed large, and they knew that the real battle was about to begin. The tension at the Xavier Institute reached a fever pitch as the day of Magneto's inevitable arrival approached. The X-Men were on high alert, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. But amidst the preparations and planning, a different kind of tension was building, a more personal, more complex conflict that had been simmering beneath the surface. Naruto, who had been at the center of the Institute's efforts to prepare for Magneto, found himself grappling with emotions he had never fully confronted before. His feelings for Jean, Emma, and Storm had grown stronger over the weeks, and now they were becoming impossible to ignore. It was a situation Naruto had never imagined he would find himself in. Back in Konoha, his love life had always been straightforward, if a bit unrequited. His heart had belonged to Sakura for so long. But now, in this new world, he was faced with three incredible women, each of whom had found a way into his heart in different ways. A moment with Jean. Jean Grey was perhaps the most complex of the three. Her struggles with the Phoenix Force had created a bond between her and Naruto that was deep and intense. They had spent so much time together, both in and out of training, that Naruto felt he understood her on a level few others did. He admired her strength, her resilience, and her kindness, qualities that had drawn him to her almost from the moment they met. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of preparations, Naruto found himself in the library with Jean. The room was quiet, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire in the hearth and the rustle of pages as Jean absent-mindedly flipped through a book. Naruto could sense her distraction, the weight of the Phoenix Force still lingering in her mind. "Jean," Naruto began, his voice soft but full of concern, "are you okay?" Jean looked up from her book, her green eyes meeting his. She hesitated for a moment before closing the book and setting it aside. "I'm managing," she replied, though her tone betrayed her unease. "It's just hard, sometimes. Knowing that the Phoenix is always there, waiting." Naruto moved closer, sitting beside her on the couch. "You're stronger than it, Jean. I've seen you fight it, and I know you can win." Jean smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I wish I had your confidence. But, thank you, Naruto. You've been a real friend through all of this." There was a pause, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Naruto could feel the words bubbling up inside him, the feelings he had been holding back. But before he could say anything, Jean spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "Sometimes, I think about how different things would be if I didn't have this power. If I could just be normal. Would things be simpler? Easier?" Naruto shook his head. "You're not normal, Jean, and that's what makes you amazing. The Phoenix Force might be a part of you, but it doesn't define you. You're strong, caring, and you're fighting every day to keep the people you care about safe. That's what matters." Jean's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. "Thank you, Naruto. You have no idea how much that means to me." Naruto's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. He wanted to reach out, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But he hesitated, unsure if it was the right time or if his feelings would complicate things even further. In the end, he simply took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I'll always be here for you, Jean. No matter what." Jean squeezed his hand back, her grip warm and reassuring. "I know. And that's what keeps me going." An encounter with Emma. As his connection with Jean deepened, Naruto couldn't help but feel a similar pull towards Emma Frost. Emma was a mystery to him, cold and distant on the surface, but with a depth of emotion and vulnerability that she rarely allowed anyone to see. Their conversations had become more frequent, more personal, and Naruto found himself drawn to her sharp intellect and hidden kindness. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Naruto wandered the halls of the mansion, unable to sleep. He found Emma in the library, sitting by the fire with a glass of wine in her hand, lost in thought. "Couldn't sleep?" Naruto asked, stepping into the room. Emma looked up, her expression unreadable as usual. "Not tonight," she replied, taking a sip of her wine. "Too much on my mind." Naruto sat down across from her, watching the way the firelight played across her features. "I get that. There's a lot going on." Emma nodded, setting her glass down. "Yes. And it's only going to get more complicated from here, isn't it?" Naruto didn't need to ask what she meant. The threat of Magneto loomed large over them all, but there was something else in Emma's voice, something more personal. "Emma," Naruto began, choosing his words carefully, "I know you've been through a lot, and I know you don't like letting people in. But you don't have to keep everything bottled up. You can talk to me." Emma's eyes flickered with something surprise, perhaps, or maybe just a hint of vulnerability. "You've seen more of me than most people ever will, Naruto. But that doesn't mean it's easy for me to open up." Naruto nodded, understanding. "I know. But you don't have to do it all at once. Just know that I'm here if you need someone to talk to. Or just someone to sit with." Emma studied him for a moment, her gaze intense. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back in her chair, her guard lowering just a fraction. "You're different, Naruto. You see things in people that they don't even see in themselves." Naruto smiled softly. "I just try to see the best in people. And I see a lot of good in you, Emma, even if you don't always show it." Emma looked away, her expression unreadable again. "You're too kind for your own good, Uzumaki." "Maybe," Naruto replied, his tone light. But I'd rather be kind than anything else. Emma shook her head, but there was a faint smile on her lips. You're a strange one, Naruto. But thank you. For being here. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly in the background. Naruto could feel the tension between them, the unspoken emotions that lingered just beneath the surface. But, like with Jean, he didn't push it. There would be time for those conversations later. Right now, just being there for each other was enough. The conversation with Storm. Then there was Storm. Naruto's relationship with her was different from the others, less fraught with the complexities of romantic tension, but no less deep. Storm had become a mentor and a confidant to Naruto, someone he could turn to for guidance and support. But as they spent more time together, Naruto began to see her not just as a mentor, but as a woman with her own strengths, vulnerabilities, and desires. One afternoon, as the preparations for Magneto's arrival continued, Naruto found himself training with Storm in the mansion's gardens. The air was crisp, the scent of earth and flowers all around them, as they moved through a series of exercises designed to hone their reflexes and coordination. Storm watched him closely as they sparred, her movements graceful and controlled. You've improved a great deal since you first arrived, she remarked, ducking under one of his strikes and countering with a swift kick that Naruto barely managed to block. Naruto grinned, his breath coming in short bursts as he stepped back, preparing for another attack. I've had a good teacher. Storm smiled, but there was a seriousness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. You've learned quickly, Naruto, but there's more to being a warrior than just physical strength. You have a good heart, and that's important, but you must also learn to temper it with wisdom. Naruto paused, lowering his fists as he looked at her. What do you mean? Storm stopped moving as well, her expression softening. I've seen the way you care about those around you, Naruto. You want to protect everyone, to keep them safe. But sometimes, that desire can lead you to take on more than you can handle. You must learn to trust in others, to share the burden. Naruto nodded slowly, taking her words to heart. I've been trying to do that. But it's hard, you know. I don't want to let anyone down. You won't, Storm assured him, her voice gentle. But you can't do everything alone. We're all here for you, just as you are here for us. Naruto looked at her, feeling a warmth in his chest. Storm had always been there for him, offering guidance and support, and he realized just how much he had come to rely on her. Thank you, Storm, Naruto said quietly. For everything. Storm smiled, reaching out to place a hand on his shoulder. You're welcome, Naruto. You've come a long way, and I'm proud of the person you're becoming. There was a moment of silence between them, the connection they shared deepening in that quiet space. Naruto felt a surge of affection for Storm, not just as a mentor, but as someone who had come to mean a great deal to him. The conflict within. As the days passed, Naruto found himself increasingly torn between the feelings he had for Jean, Emma, and Storm. Each of them had touched his heart in different ways, and he didn't know how to reconcile the emotions swirling inside him. He cared deeply for all three women, and the thought of hurting any of them was unbearable. But he knew he couldn't ignore his feelings forever. The situation with Magneto was coming to a head, and he needed to be clear about where he stood, both in battle and in his heart. One evening, unable to sleep, Naruto found himself on the roof of the mansion, looking out at the stars. The cool night air helped to clear his mind, but it didn't ease the turmoil in his heart. "Can't sleep again?" a familiar voice asked. Naruto turned to see Jean, her fiery red hair catching the light of the moon. She walked over to stand beside him, her presence both comforting and disquieting. "Yeah," Naruto admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Too much on my mind." Jean nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Me too. It's hard to shut it all off, especially with everything that's happening." Naruto hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject that had been weighing on him for days. But he knew he couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. "Jean," he began, his voice quiet but earnest, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been thinking about a lot." Jean turned to face him, her expression serious. "What is it, Naruto?" Naruto took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I care about you. A lot. But I also care about Emma and Storm. And I don't know what to do about it." Jean's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look away. "You have feelings for all of us?" Naruto nodded, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders as he admitted the truth. "Yeah. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now I'm just confused. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I don't know how to make sense of it all." Jean was silent for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Naruto, I don't think there's an easy answer to this. Relationships are complicated, especially when feelings are involved. But I think the most important thing is to be honest with yourself and with us." Naruto looked at her, his heart aching. "I just don't want to lose any of you. You've all become so important to me." Jean smiled softly, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. "You won't lose us, Naruto. We all care about you too, and we'll figure this out together. Whatever happens, we'll find a way to make it work." Naruto felt a surge of relief at her words, and he smiled back at her, grateful for her understanding. Thank you, Jean. That means a lot. As they stood together under the night sky, Naruto felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead was still uncertain, and the battle with Magneto was looming ever closer, but he knew he wasn't alone. He had Jean, Emma, and Storm by his side, and together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. The day finally arrived. The X-Men had prepared as much as they could, and all signs pointed to Magneto's forces closing in on the Xavier Institute. There was an uneasy calm over the mansion, a sense of inevitability as everyone made their final preparations. The team knew that this would be one of the most difficult battles they had faced yet. But with Magneto's interest in Naruto, the stakes were even higher. Naruto had spent the morning in quiet contemplation. The conversations he had with Jean, Emma, and Storm still echoed in his mind. He knew that no matter what happened, his feelings and the complex relationships he had with each of them would have to wait. Right now, the survival of the Institute and possibly the world was at stake. In the command center, Professor Xavier stood before the gathered X-Men, his voice calm but filled with the gravity of the situation. Magneto is coming, and he will stop at nothing to get what he wants, Xavier said, his eyes scanning the room. His forces are already on the move, and it's only a matter of time before they reach us. We must be ready for anything. Storm, her eyes steely with determination, stood beside the professor. We've dealt with Magneto before, but this time, he's after something specific, Naruto. His abilities and power are a wild card in this world, and Magneto will try to either recruit or eliminate him. We can't let that happen. Wolverine growled, his claws extending with a metallic snick. Let him come. I'm ready to tear that buckethead apart. Cyclops, ever the strategist, crossed his arms and glanced at Naruto. You're the target, Naruto, which means you'll need to be ready for anything. But we'll all be there to back you up. Naruto nodded, his resolve firm. I won't let him take me. I've faced worse before, and we'll stop him together. Jean, standing near the front of the group, gave Naruto a reassuring smile, while Emma remained silent but watchful, her mind already working through the possibilities of the battle to come. Xavier took a deep breath and continued. Magneto's control over metal makes him a dangerous adversary, especially here at the Institute, where much of the infrastructure is metallic. We will need to minimize the damage and keep him as far away from critical areas as possible. I will do my best to reach out to him telepathically, but I fear his mind may be closed to reason. Storm glanced at Naruto. What's the plan for you, Naruto? We need to make sure you stay safe. Naruto shook his head. I'm not hiding. If Magneto wants me, he'll have to face me head on. I've got plenty of tricks up my sleeve, and I'm not going to let him walk all over us. Wolverine chuckled. That's the spirit, kid. Just don't get in over your head. But before anyone could say anything else, the alarm blared through the mansion, signaling that Magneto's forces had arrived. They're here, Cyclops said, his voice tense but focused. Let's move. The battle begins. Outside the Xavier Institute, the air was thick with tension. The X-Men gathered in the front courtyard, watching as a group of figures appeared on the horizon. At the forefront was Magneto himself, hovering in the air, his cape billowing behind him as he approached with purpose. Behind Magneto were members of his Brotherhood of Mutants, Juggernaut, Mystique, and several others, each of them prepared for battle. It was clear that Magneto had brought his most dangerous allies for this confrontation. Magneto's eyes locked on Naruto as he floated closer, a look of calculated interest on his face. So, you're the one they've been talking about. The outsider with powers beyond this world. Naruto stepped forward, his fists clenched and his chakra flaring around him. I don't know what you want with me, but I'm not going anywhere with you, Magneto. If you think I'm just going to roll over, you're in for a surprise. Magneto smirked, his voice cold. Such defiance. But I'm afraid you don't understand the importance of your presence here. You possess a power unlike any other in this world, a power that could tip the scales in our favor. Join me, Naruto, and together we can reshape this world for the better. Mutants will finally take their rightful place as the dominant species, and you can help lead that charge. Naruto shook his head, his eyes blazing with determination. I'm not interested in ruling anything. I fight to protect people, not control them. I've seen what happens when people like you try to force others to follow them, and it always ends the same way, in destruction. Magneto's expression darkened, and the metal around the courtyard began to tremble as he extended his hand. I was hoping you would see reason, but it seems you'll have to learn the hard way. But the flick of his wrist, Magneto sent a wave of metallic debris hurtling toward Naruto and the X-Men. Get ready. Cyclops shouted, firing a beam from his visor to intercept the attack. The battle had begun. The X-Men sprang into action, each of them moving to counter Magneto's forces. Storm called down lightning from the sky, directing it at Juggernaut, while Wolverine charged forward, his claws gleaming in the afternoon sun. Jean and Emma worked together to create psychic shields, protecting the team from Magneto's relentless assault. Naruto, meanwhile, formed several shadow clones, each one darting around the battlefield to draw Magneto's attention. The clones attacked from different angles, their Rasengan spinning with deadly precision, but Magneto was a master of his element. He used the metal in the environment to deflect and counter every attack, his movements smooth and controlled. "You'll have to do better than that," Magneto said, his voice cold as he raised both hands, sending a torrent of metal toward Naruto. Naruto gritted his teeth, forming another Rasengan in his hand. "Fine by me." He leaped forward, dodging the incoming attack and slamming the Rasengan into the ground, sending a shockwave of chakra that disrupted Magneto's control over the debris. For a moment, the battlefield was clear. But Magneto wasn't finished. With a flick of his hand, he lifted several large metal beams from the nearby structures and sent them crashing toward Naruto. "Watch out," Jean called, using her telekinesis to redirect some of the beams away from him. Naruto quickly formed a few more clones to act as decoys, giving himself room to maneuver. "Thanks, Jean. We need to keep Magneto off balance," Emma said, her voice sharp as she concentrated on a psychic attack. "He's too powerful when he has control of the environment." Storm, her eyes glowing white with power, nodded. "I'll create a distraction. Naruto, hit him with everything you've got when I give the signal." Naruto grinned, his energy building as his clones continued to dart around the battlefield. "You got it." Storm took to the air, summoning a massive gust of wind that whipped through the courtyard, sending debris flying in all directions. The sudden chaos forced Magneto to focus on maintaining his control over the metal, giving Naruto the opening he needed. "Now!" Storm shouted. Naruto's chakra flared around him as he gathered his energy, forming a giant Rasengan in his hand. He dashed toward Magneto, his clones moving with him, all of them converging on the same target. Magneto, his concentration split between controlling the battlefield and defending himself, barely had time to react as Naruto closed the distance. With a powerful thrust, Naruto slammed the Rasengan into Magneto's shield of metal, the swirling energy cutting through the debris and sending Magneto crashing to the ground. For a moment, it seemed as though the battle was won. But Magneto, ever the strategist, had one last card to play. As he struggled to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury, he extended his hand toward the mansion. The metal framework of the building began to tremble, and with a terrifying screech, it started to buckle and twist. "He's going to bring down the whole mansion," Jean shouted, her voice filled with panic. Naruto's heart raced as he realized the danger. The mansion wasn't just a home, it was a sanctuary for all the students and mutants inside. If Magneto destroyed it, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Not on my watch," Naruto growled. He channeled his chakra into his hands, forming multiple Rasengans as he leaped into the air, aiming directly for Magneto. His clones followed suit, each of them coordinating their attacks to stop Magneto before he could complete his devastating plan. But Magneto, weakened though he was, still had enough strength left to unleash one final attack. With a furious roar, he sent a wave of metal hurtling toward Naruto and the others, determined to take them down with him. Naruto pushed forward, his Rasengan spinning with immense power as he collided with the incoming metal. The clash of energy and debris shook the ground, the force of the impact sending shockwaves through the air. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. And then, with a blinding flash of light, Naruto's Rasengans broke through the wave of metal, shattering Magneto's defenses. Magneto was thrown back, landing hard on the ground as his control over the metal finally faltered. The debris he had been manipulating crashed to the ground, harmlessly scattered around the battlefield. Naruto landed nearby, breathing heavily but victorious. He looked over at Magneto, who was struggling to rise, his strength spent. "It's over, Magneto," Naruto said, his voice firm. "You're not going to hurt anyone else." Magneto glared at him, but there was a grudging respect in his eyes. "You're strong, Uzumaki. Stronger than I anticipated. But this isn't the end. There will always be another battle, another fight for the future of our kind." Before Naruto could respond, Mystique and the remaining members of the Brotherhood appeared at Magneto's side, ready to retreat. "Next time, Uzumaki," Mystique said, her voice full of promise as she helped Magneto to his feet. "Next time, you won't be so lucky." And with that, they vanished, leaving the X-Men to assess the damage and catch their breath. Aftermath. The battle was over, but the cost was high. The mansion had sustained significant damage, and many of the students were shaken by the confrontation. But thanks to the combined efforts of Naruto and the X-Men, the worst had been avoided. As the dust settled, Naruto found himself surrounded by his friends Jean, Emma, Storm, Cyclops, and the others, all of them relieved and grateful for the victory. "You did it, Naruto," Jean said, her eyes full of admiration. "We did it," Naruto corrected, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "It was a team effort." Emma stepped closer, her usual icy demeanor softened by the heat of battle. "You fought well, Naruto. But don't think this is the end. Magneto will be back and we need to be ready. Storm, standing tall despite the exhaustion in her eyes, nodded in agreement. Emma's right. We need to stay vigilant. But for now, we should be proud of what we accomplished today. Naruto looked around at his friends, his heart swelling with pride and affection. They had faced incredible odds and come out on top, and in that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they began the work of rebuilding and recovering, Naruto couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The battle was won, but the journey was far from over. And as he looked at the people around him, the friends, the comrades, and the ones who had captured his heart, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The aftermath of the battle with Magneto left the Xavier Institute in a state of disarray. While the X-Men had managed to fend off the attack, the damage to the mansion was extensive. More concerning, however, was the fact that Emma Frost had been captured during the chaos. Magneto, though retreating, had managed to take Emma as a hostage, intending to use her telepathic abilities to further his plans. This was a blow to the X-Men not just because of the loss of a valuable ally, but also because of the personal connections that had formed between Emma and the team, especially with Naruto. Naruto couldn't shake the image of Emma being dragged away by Magneto's forces. He had fought so hard to protect everyone, but in the end, he had been unable to prevent her capture. The weight of that failure hung heavily on his shoulders. But there was no time to dwell on what had already happened. The X-Men had to act quickly to rescue Emma before Magneto could exploit her abilities. The team gathered in the war room, each member focused and determined to bring her back. "We don't have much time," Cyclops said, his voice steady as he addressed the group. "Magneto's stronghold is heavily fortified, and if he manages to use Emma's powers against us, it could be disastrous." "Do we know where he's taken her?" Storm asked, her eyes narrowing with determination. Xavier nodded, his hands resting on the table. "I've managed to trace Emma's psychic signature to a location deep within the Savage Land. It's a dangerous and unpredictable place, but it's where Magneto has established one of his main bases." "The Savage Land?" Wolverine growled, his claws extending slightly. "That place is a nightmare. Dinosaurs, hostile tribes, and worse. But if that's where he is, then that's where we're going." Naruto clenched his fists, his determination burning brightly. "We can't waste any time. Emma's strong, but Magneto's no joke. We need to get her out of there before he can do any real damage." Jean placed a reassuring hand on Naruto's shoulder. "We'll get her back, Naruto. But we need to be smart about this. Charging in without a plan will only put Emma and all of us at greater risk." Cyclops nodded in agreement. "Jean's right. We need to coordinate our efforts. Magneto will be expecting us, so we have to be ready for anything." As the team began to formulate their plan, Naruto felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. He knew that rescuing Emma wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to bring her back safely. There was no other option. Into the Savage Land. The Blackbird, the X-Men's advanced aircraft, cut through the skies as it carried the team toward the Savage Land. The journey was tense, with each member of the team mentally preparing for the battle to come. The Savage Land was a prehistoric jungle hidden in the heart of Antarctica, a place where time seemed to stand still and dangers lurked around every corner. It was one of the most treacherous locations on Earth, and Magneto's presence there made it even more perilous. As they approached their destination, Xavier's voice came over the comms. "We're nearing Magneto's base. I can sense Emma's presence, but she's weak. Be careful, Magneto will have defenses in place." Naruto, seated next to Jean, glanced at her with a determined look. "We'll get her back. No matter what it takes." Jean nodded, her expression serious. "We will. Just remember, stick to the plan." The Blackbird descended into the dense jungle, its engines quiet as it landed in a small clearing. The team disembarked, immediately feeling the oppressive heat and humidity of the Savage Land. The jungle was alive with the sounds of strange creatures, and the thick foliage made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Wolverine took point, his enhanced senses on high alert. "Stay close and keep your eyes peeled. This place will eat you alive if you're not careful." Naruto formed a few shadow clones, sending them ahead to scout the area. "We'll cover more ground this way. If anything's out there, we'll know." The team moved through the jungle cautiously, making their way toward Magneto's base. The journey was slow, with the dense vegetation and treacherous terrain making progress difficult. But they pressed on, knowing that time was of the essence. As they neared the base, the jungle began to give way to more rugged, rocky terrain. The massive structure of Magneto's fortress loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape. Magneto's inside, Xavier confirmed through the comms. "Be careful, he'll have defenses in place, and he may already know you're here." Cyclops motioned for the team to spread out. "We need to take out those defenses and find Emma. Naruto, your clones can help with that. Jean, Storm, you provide cover." Naruto nodded, his clones already moving into position. "Let's do this." The X-Men advanced on the fortress, each member of the team performing their role with precision. Cyclops used his optic blasts to take out automated turrets and barriers, while Jean and Storm worked together to neutralize any aerial threats. Wolverine and Naruto's clones handled the ground defenses, clearing a path toward the entrance. As they breached the outer defenses and entered the fortress, the real challenge began. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one filled with potential traps and dangers. Magneto's influence was everywhere, the very walls vibrating with the power of his control over metal. "Stay sharp," Cyclops warned. Magneto could be anywhere. Naruto's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the fortress, his thoughts focused on finding Emma. He couldn't let himself be distracted. Magneto was dangerous, and they had to be ready for anything. Suddenly, the walls around them began to shift and groan, the metal bending and warping as Magneto made his presence known. "You're too late, X-Men," Magneto's voice echoed through the corridors. "Emma Frost is mine now. And soon, her power will be as well." Naruto growled, his chakra flaring as he formed another Rasengan. "We'll see about that." The walls twisted further, creating barriers and obstacles designed to slow the team down. But Naruto and the others pushed forward, using their abilities to break through the metal and clear the way. They reached a large central chamber where Magneto stood, his arms outstretched as he manipulated the metal around him. Behind him, Emma was trapped in a psychic containment field, her eyes closed as she fought against the mental restraints Magneto had placed on her. "Emma!" Naruto shouted, his heart aching at the sight of her. Magneto turned to face them, a cold smile on his lips. "You're persistent, Uzumaki. But this is where your journey ends." Naruto didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his Rasengan spinning with incredible power as he aimed directly for Magneto. But Magneto was ready. With a wave of his hand, he sent a barrage of metal spikes flying toward Naruto, forcing him to dodge and weave to avoid them. Cyclops fired his optic blasts at Magneto, but the Metal Master easily deflected them, redirecting the beams back toward the team. Jean created a psychic shield to protect them, but Magneto's assault was relentless. "Hold him off," Cyclops shouted. "We need to get to Emma." Wolverine snarled, launching himself at Magneto with his claws extended. "I'll tear you apart." But Magneto was unfazed. He caught Wolverine mid-air, suspending him in a field of magnetic energy before throwing him across the room. Wolverine crashed into the wall, momentarily stunned but unhurt. Storm unleashed a powerful bolt of lightning, but Magneto absorbed the energy, using it to strengthen his control over the metal in the room. The situation was growing desperate. Naruto, breathing heavily from the exertion, knew they had to change tactics. "We need to disrupt his control over the metal." Jean nodded, her expression determined. "Leave that to me." She closed her eyes, focusing all her psychic energy on Magneto's mind. For a moment, Magneto's concentration wavered, the metal around them shuddering as Jean attempted to break through his defenses. "Now, Naruto," Jean urged. Naruto seized the moment. He formed multiple shadow clones, each one charging at Magneto from different angles. The clones attacked simultaneously, forcing Magneto to split his focus between them. As Magneto's attention was divided, Cyclops, Storm, and Wolverine launched a coordinated assault, striking at the weakened points in Magneto's defenses. The combined effort began to wear him down, his control over the metal faltering. Naruto, seeing his chance, formed a massive Rasengan in his hand and dashed toward Magneto. "This is for Emma." With a powerful thrust, Naruto slammed the Rasengan into the field of magnetic energy surrounding Magneto, shattering it and sending the Metal Master crashing to the ground. Magneto groaned, weakened but not defeated. He struggled to rise, but Naruto and the others were already moving toward Emma. "Jean, help me with this," Naruto called, his voice urgent. Jean joined him at Emma's side, using her psychic abilities to dismantle the containment field. Emma's eyes fluttered open as the restraints fell away, and she looked up at Naruto with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Naruto," Emma whispered, her voice weak but full of emotion. Naruto smiled, his heart swelling with relief. "We're getting you out of here, Emma. Just hang on." Jean helped Emma to her feet, supporting her as they prepared to make their escape. But Magneto, though weakened, wasn't finished. He summoned the last of his strength, sending a final wave of metal toward the X-Men, determined to stop them from leaving with his prize. But Naruto, driven by the need to protect Emma, pushed himself beyond his limits. He formed a Rasen Shuriken, the powerful jutsu crackling with energy, and hurled it at the incoming metal. The Rasen Shuriken collided with the debris, slicing through it and creating a clear path for the team to escape. "Oh," Naruto shouted. "I'll cover you." Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and Wolverine moved quickly, guiding Emma toward the exit. Naruto held his ground, using his clones and jutsu to keep Magneto at bay. Finally, as the last of Magneto's strength faded, the X-Men made their way out of the fortress, Naruto bringing up the rear. They raced through the jungle, making their way back to the Blackbird as fast as they could. Once they were safely aboard the aircraft, the team took a moment to catch their breath. Emma, though still weak, managed a small smile as she looked at Naruto. You came for me, she said, her voice filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. Naruto sat beside her, taking her hand in his. Of course I did. I wasn't going to let you go. Emma squeezed his hand, her eyes softening as she looked at him. Thank you, Naruto. You saved me. Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest, the relief and happiness of having Emma back safe overwhelming him. We all did. And we're not going to let Magneto take you away again. As the Blackbird lifted off, carrying them away from the dangers of the savage land, Naruto knew that this victory, while hard-won, was just the beginning. There were still challenges ahead, still battles to be fought. But with his friends by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. And as he sat there, holding Emma's hand, he couldn't help but feel that the bond between them had grown even stronger. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. With Emma safely rescued and the team back at the Xavier Institute, the mood was one of cautious relief. The battle with Magneto had been hard-fought, and though they had emerged victorious, the scars both physical and emotional remained. The X-Men were a resilient group, but even they needed time to recover from the ordeal. The days following the rescue were a blur of rebuilding, healing, and reflection. The mansion had sustained significant damage during the battle, but the X-Men worked together to restore it. As the repairs progressed, so too did the bonds between the team members, particularly between Naruto, Jean, Emma, and Storm. The confessions. Naruto's feelings for Jean, Emma, and Storm had only grown stronger during their recent trials. He had been forced to confront the depth of his emotions and the complexity of caring for more than one person at a time. It was a confusing and overwhelming situation, but Naruto knew he couldn't keep his feelings bottled up any longer. One evening, after the day's work was done, Naruto found himself standing in one of the institute's quiet gardens. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting soft shadows on the ground. He had asked Jean, Emma, and Storm to meet him there, knowing that the time had come to be honest with them and with himself. Jean was the first to arrive, her presence as calming as ever. She smiled when she saw Naruto, though there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Naruto, what's going on? You sounded serious when you asked us to meet you here. Emma arrived next, her footsteps silent as she joined them. She gave Naruto a knowing look, as if she could sense the weight of what he was about to say. Naruto, whatever this is, just know we're here for you. Finally, Storm appeared, her white hair almost glowing in the moonlight. Her expression was one of quiet understanding, as if she had already guessed what was on Naruto's mind. Naruto, you've been through a lot lately. If there's something you need to say, we're ready to listen. Naruto took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He had faced down enemies and survived battles that most people couldn't imagine, but this was different. This was personal. I asked you all to come here because there's something I need to tell you, Naruto began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Since I've come to this world, I've found myself in situations I never expected. I've made new friends, new allies, and I've found people who have become really important to me. Jean, Emma, and Storm listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Naruto continued, his eyes shifting between the three women. The truth is, I care about all of you. More than I ever thought I could. You've each helped me in different ways, Jean, you've been a rock for me, always there when I needed someone to lean on. Emma, you've shown me a side of yourself that I don't think many people get to see, and I've come to admire you for it. And Storm, you've been a mentor and a friend, someone I respect and trust more than almost anyone. He paused, searching for the right words. I know this might sound crazy, but I've come to realize that I have feelings for all three of you. And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't want to hurt any of you, but I also can't deny how I feel. For a moment, there was silence. The three women exchanged glances, processing Naruto's confession. It was Jean who spoke first, her voice gentle and understanding. Naruto, Jean began, stepping closer to him, what you're feeling isn't crazy. Emotions are complicated, and it's okay to care about more than one person. What's important is that you're honest about it. Emma nodded in agreement, her usual icy demeanor softened by the sincerity in her eyes. You're not the first person to find themselves in this kind of situation, Naruto. What matters is how we handle it together. Storm placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, her touch reassuring. We've all seen how much you care about us, Naruto. And we care about you too. This doesn't have to be something that tears us apart. It can be something that brings us closer. Naruto felt a wave of relief wash over him, the fear of rejection that had been gnawing at him slowly fading. So what do we do now? Jean smiled, a hint of playfulness in her eyes. I think the first step is to stop worrying so much. We'll figure this out together, just like we faced everything else. Emma tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing on her lips. Who knows? Maybe we can find a way to make this work for all of us. Storm nodded, her expression warm. The important thing is that we support each other, no matter what. We've been through too much to let anything come between us now." Naruto felt his heart swell with gratitude and affection for the three women standing before him. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what I did to deserve friends like you, but I'm glad you're here." Jean, Emma, and Storm exchanged knowing smiles, and in that moment, a sense of understanding passed between them. They had all faced incredible challenges together, and they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it as a team no matter how unconventional their relationships might be. The final assault. As the bonds between Naruto, Jean, Emma, and Storm deepened, the threat of Magneto continued to loom large. The X-Men knew that the battle with Magneto was far from over. Although they had rescued Emma, Magneto had retreated to regroup, and it was only a matter of time before he launched his next attack. The atmosphere at the Xavier Institute was one of tense anticipation. The X-Men worked tirelessly to prepare for Magneto's return, reinforcing the mansion's defenses and strategizing for the inevitable confrontation. They knew that this battle would be unlike any they had faced before. Magneto was desperate, and that made him more dangerous than ever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Professor Xavier called the team together in the war room. The mood was somber, everyone aware that the coming battle could decide the fate of both mutants and humans alike. "Magneto has been regrouping," Xavier began, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Our intelligence suggests that he's planning a final all-out assault on the Xavier Institute. He's gathered the most dangerous members of his brotherhood, and he's planning to use their combined power to destroy everything we've built." "We've been ready for this," Cyclops said, his expression determined. "We can't let him win." Storm nodded in agreement. "We'll defend this place with everything we've got. Magneto's not taking us down." Jean's eyes glowed with resolve. "We've faced him before, and we'll do it again. But we need to be smart about this. Magneto knows our strengths and weaknesses." Xavier looked around at the gathered X-Men, his expression solemn. "This will be the fight of our lives. We must protect not only ourselves, but the students and everyone who calls this place home. We will face Magneto and his brotherhood, and we will show them that we will not be defeated." Naruto, standing with Jean, Emma, and Storm, felt a surge of determination. He had found a new home here, new friends, and people who had become incredibly important to him. He wasn't going to let Magneto take that away. "We're ready," Naruto said, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll stop him, no matter what it takes." Xavier nodded, a small but confident smile on his face. "Then let's prepare. We don't know when Magneto will strike, but when he does, we'll be ready." The calm before the storm. The hours before the battle were filled with a strange mixture of calm and tension. The X-Men moved with purpose, each of them preparing in their own way for the fight that was to come. Naruto spent time with Jean, Emma, and Storm, knowing that this could be the last quiet moment they shared before everything changed. They didn't need to say much, their presence with each other was enough to convey what words couldn't. As night fell, the mansion was bathed in an eerie silence, the calm before the storm. The X-Men took their positions, each of them ready to defend their home and each other with everything they had. Naruto stood with Jean, Emma, and Storm on the mansion's front steps, looking out into the darkness. The weight of what was about to happen pressed down on him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "I'm glad you're here," Naruto said, his voice quiet but sincere. "All of you." Jean smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "We're glad you're here too, Naruto. We'll get through this together." Emma's eyes softened as she looked at him. "No matter what happens, we'll face it as a team." Storm nodded, her expression filled with determination. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew thicker. And then, in the distance, they saw the glow of lights, the rumble of engines. Magneto and his forces were approaching. "Here they come," Cyclops said, his voice grim as he prepared for battle. "Get ready, everyone." The X-Men took their positions, each of them ready to face the oncoming assault. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest as he looked out at the approaching forces, but he pushed aside his fear, focusing on the faces of the people beside him. This was it, the final battle. Everything they had fought for, everything they had built, was on the line. But Naruto knew that with his friends by his side, they would face whatever came their way. As Magneto's forces closed in, the X-Men stood united, ready to defend their home and each other. The war had begun. The night air was thick with tension as Magneto's forces advanced on the Xavier Institute. The X-Men stood ready, their hearts pounding with the anticipation of the battle that would soon unfold. This was it, the final confrontation between the X-Men and the Brotherhood, a battle that would determine the fate of both mutants and humans alike. Magneto floated above his forces, his eyes glowing with determination and fury. Behind him, the most powerful members of his Brotherhood assembled. Juggernaut, Mystique, Pyro, and others, each of them prepared to follow Magneto into the fray. "X-Men." Magneto's voice boomed across the courtyard, filled with authority and anger. "You have stood in my way for far too long. Tonight, that ends. Tonight, the age of mutants begins, and there is no place for those who would protect a world that fears and despises us. Naruto, standing beside Jean, Emma, and Storm, felt a surge of anger at Magneto's words. He had seen firsthand the destruction that could come from the kind of hatred and fear that Magneto preached, and he wasn't about to let that vision of the future become a reality. Cyclops stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed Magneto. "We won't let you do this, Magneto. The world you're trying to create isn't one of peace, it's one of destruction and tyranny. And we'll stop you, just like we've stopped you before." Magneto's eyes narrowed, and the metal structures around the mansion began to tremble as he exerted his power. "Then you will fall, Cyclops, along with anyone who stands in my way." With a wave of his hand, Magneto unleashed a torrent of metal debris, sending it hurtling toward the X-Men. The battle had begun. The battle unfolds. The X-Men moved as one, each member taking up their position and countering the attacks with precision and coordination. Cyclops fired a powerful optic blast, intercepting the incoming debris and scattering it across the battlefield. Wolverine charged forward, his claws extended as he aimed for Juggernaut, while Storm took to the skies, summoning lightning and winds to disrupt the Brotherhood's advance. Naruto quickly formed a group of shadow clones, sending them into the thick of the battle to create chaos and draw the enemy's attention. The clones moved with incredible speed and agility, attacking from all angles and keeping Magneto's forces on their toes. Jean focused her telekinetic powers, creating a protective barrier around the mansion to shield it from Magneto's assaults. "We need to keep him away from the building," she called out to the others. "If he gets too close, he could bring the whole place down." Emma, her psychic abilities sharpened by the intensity of the situation, focused on disrupting the minds of the Brotherhood members, creating confusion and disarray among their ranks. "Naruto, keep the pressure on Magneto. We need to break his concentration." Naruto nodded, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to launch his next attack. He knew that Magneto was the key to this battle. If they could defeat him, the rest of the Brotherhood would fall. With a burst of chakra, Naruto charged forward, his Rasengan spinning with deadly energy. He weaved through the battlefield, dodging attacks from Pyro's flames and Juggernaut's powerful blows, his focus solely on reaching Magneto. Magneto, seeing Naruto's approach, turned his attention to the young ninja, raising his hands to manipulate the metal around him. But Naruto was ready. As Magneto sent a wave of metal shards toward him, Naruto quickly created a barrier of chakra to deflect the attack, closing the distance between them. "You think you can defeat me, boy?" Magneto sneered, his voice filled with disdain. "I control the very metal you stand on." Naruto met Magneto's gaze, his eyes blazing with determination. "Maybe you control metal, but you don't control me." With a powerful leap, Naruto brought the Rasengan crashing down toward Magneto. The energy from the attack collided with Magneto's magnetic field, creating a shockwave that shook the ground beneath them. Magneto gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain his control as Naruto's attack pushed against his defenses. But Magneto was not so easily defeated. With a surge of power, he redirected the metal around them, creating a massive barrier that separated him from Naruto. "You're strong, Uzumaki," Magneto admitted, his voice strained. "But strength alone won't save you. My vision for the future is inevitable. You can't stop what I've set in motion." Naruto, undeterred, leaped over the barrier, forming a new Rasen Shuriken in his hand. "We'll see about that." As Naruto prepared to launch his attack, Jean and Storm moved in to support him. Jean used her telekinesis to weaken Magneto's magnetic field, while Storm unleashed a powerful gust of wind to throw Magneto off balance. The combined effort of the X-Men began to wear Magneto down. His control over the metal structures wavered, and his movements became slower, more desperate. But even as they pushed him to his limits, Magneto refused to yield. "Enough." Magneto roared, his voice filled with fury. With a final, desperate effort, he summoned a massive wave of metal, sending it crashing toward the X-Men. Naruto, seeing the impending danger, acted quickly. He channeled his chakra into his Rasen Shuriken, increasing its power to the maximum. "This ends now, Magneto." With a powerful throw, Naruto hurled the Rasen Shuriken at the incoming wave of metal. The jutsu collided with the debris, creating a blinding explosion of energy that tore through Magneto's attack, scattering the metal across the battlefield. Magneto, his strength finally spent, fell to the ground, his powers drained. The X-Men surrounded him, ready to strike if he made any move to continue the fight. But Magneto, beaten and exhausted, merely looked up at them with a bitter expression. "You may have won this battle, X-Men," he said, his voice hoarse. "But the war is far from over. My dream will never die." Cyclops stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We're not going to let that happen, Magneto. This world doesn't need to be ruled by fear and hatred." As the X-Men secured Magneto and his remaining Brotherhood members, the reality of their victory began to sink in. The battle was over, and the Xavier Institute still stood. After the battle, With Magneto defeated, the X-Men began the process of rebuilding and recovery. The battle had taken a toll on everyone, but they knew that they had stood strong against one of the most powerful forces in the world. The Xavier Institute had been protected and their way of life preserved for now. Naruto, exhausted but relieved, found himself once again on the roof of the mansion, looking out at the horizon. The night was quiet now, the chaos of the battle having finally subsided. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Jean, Emma, and Storm approaching. Each of them bore signs of the battle cuts, bruises, and exhaustion, but their expressions were warm as they joined him. "We did it," Jean said, her voice filled with quiet satisfaction. Emma nodded, her icy demeanor softened by the victory. "You fought well, Naruto. We all did." Storm placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, her expression full of pride. "This victory belongs to all of us. We stood together, and we protected what matters most." Naruto smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I couldn't have done it without you, all of you. I'm just glad we're all okay." The four of them stood together in silence for a moment, each of them reflecting on the journey they had taken to get to this point. The battles they had fought, the challenges they had overcome, and the bonds they had formed along the way. As the night stretched on, Naruto felt a warmth in his chest that went beyond the relief of victory. It was a sense of belonging, of having found a place where he truly fit in. A place where he was not just a hero, but a friend, a comrade, and someone who was deeply cared for. Jean, sensing his thoughts, smiled at him. "You know, Naruto, you've become a part of this team, a part of this family. And no matter what happens next, we're all in this together." Emma's eyes softened as she looked at him. "Whatever challenges lie ahead, we'll face them as a team. You can count on that." Storm nodded in agreement, her voice gentle. "You've shown us that you're more than just a warrior, Naruto. You're someone we can trust, someone we can rely on." Naruto felt a lump in his throat, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He had always wanted to find a place where he belonged, and now he had it right here, with these incredible people who had become so important to him. "Thank you," Naruto said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't ask for better friends, better teammates." Jean, Emma, and Storm exchanged knowing smiles, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift. But even as they stood there, basking in the glow of their victory, Naruto knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to face. But with his friends by his side, he felt ready to take on whatever came next. As the night deepened, the four of them stayed on the roof, talking quietly and enjoying the peace that had been hard-won. The future was uncertain, but for now, they had each other. And that was more than enough. The Xavier Institute was slowly returning to normal after the intense battle with Magneto. Repairs were underway, and the students had resumed their classes, though the memory of the battle was still fresh in everyone's minds. But with Magneto defeated and his brotherhood disbanded, there was a sense of peace and security that had settled over the mansion. Naruto, Jean, Emma, and Storm had grown even closer in the days following the battle. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle and deepened by the trials they had faced together, was stronger than ever. And as life at the institute began to settle into a new routine, Naruto found himself reflecting on everything that had happened and what it all meant for his future. The quiet morning. One morning, as the sun rose over the Xavier Institute, Naruto stood on the front steps, looking out at the sprawling grounds. The early morning light bathed the mansion in a warm glow, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling in the breeze. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos and danger they had faced not so long ago. Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the tranquility of the moment settle over him like a comforting blanket. He was joined by Jean, who approached him with a smile, her red hair catching the light of the rising sun. "Good morning, Naruto. You're up early." Naruto smiled back, feeling a warmth in his chest at the sight of her. "Couldn't sleep. Just needed to clear my head, I guess." Jean nodded, standing beside him and looking out at the horizon. "It's beautiful, isn't it? After everything we've been through, it feels good to just breathe." Naruto agreed, the corners of his mouth lifting in a contented smile. "Yeah, it does. Sometimes it's easy to forget to take moments like this, especially with everything going on." As they stood there together, the peaceful silence between them was broken by the sound of footsteps. Emma and Storm joined them, each of them carrying a sense of calm that matched the morning serenity. "Enjoying the sunrise, I see," Emma said, her voice soft and teasing. Storm smiled, her eyes filled with the same warmth and affection that Naruto had come to appreciate. "It's a beautiful day. It feels like a fresh start, doesn't it?" Naruto nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude for the women standing beside him. "Yeah, it does. And I think we all deserve that." The four of them stood together in silence for a while, each of them lost in their thoughts as they soaked in the beauty of the morning. It was a moment of peace, of quiet connection, and Naruto felt a deep sense of contentment that he hadn't felt in a long time. A new path. As the day progressed, Naruto found himself in the mansion's library, paging through books and scrolls that Professor Xavier had collected over the years. It was a place of knowledge, a sanctuary where he could learn more about this world and its people. But today, his thoughts were elsewhere. He was thinking about his future and what it might hold. Jean, sensing his contemplation, approached him with a curious smile. "Naruto, what are you thinking about?" Naruto looked up from the book he was holding, his expression thoughtful. "I guess I'm just thinking about what comes next. I've been here for a while now, and well, I feel like this place is becoming more and more like home." Jean's smile grew, her eyes filled with understanding. "You do belong here, Naruto. You've become an important part of the team, of the family. But if you're thinking about leaving..." Naruto shook his head quickly. "No, I'm not thinking about leaving. It's just I feel like there's so much more I can do here. I want to keep helping, keep fighting to protect this world and the people in it." Emma, who had been quietly observing from a nearby table, chimed in. "You're a natural protector, Naruto. It's in your blood. But remember, you don't have to do everything on your own. We're all here to help you, just like you've helped us." Naruto smiled, feeling a sense of pride and determination. "I know. And that's why I want to keep working with all of you. There's so much good we can do together." Storm, who had entered the library to join them, nodded in agreement. "The world is changing, Naruto. There are always going to be challenges, but with people like you, Jean, Emma, and the rest of the X-Men, we can face whatever comes our way." Naruto felt a surge of confidence and purpose. The battles he had fought, the friendships he had made, and the love he had found all pointed to one undeniable truth. This was where he belonged. "I want to keep fighting for this world," Naruto said, his voice firm with conviction. "And I want to do it with all of you by my side." Jean, Emma, and Storm exchanged smiles, their hearts swelling with pride and affection for Naruto. They knew that they had found not just a teammate, but someone who was willing to fight for what was right, someone who had become an integral part of their lives. "And we'll be right there with you," Jean said, her voice filled with sincerity. "No matter what," Emma added, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "Always," Storm finished, her voice warm and steady. A new beginning. As the day drew to a close, Naruto found himself once again on the roof of the mansion, looking out at the horizon as the sun began to set. It was a place where he had often come to think, to reflect on everything that had happened. But tonight was different. Tonight, he felt a sense of closure, of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. He was joined by Jean, Emma, and Storm, who had come to share this moment with him. They stood together, watching as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the last light of the day casting a warm glow over the mansion. "We've come a long way," Naruto said quietly, his voice filled with emotion. "I never expected any of this when I first arrived, but I'm glad I did." Jean smiled, her hand gently resting on his arm. "So are we, Naruto. You've changed our lives in so many ways." Emma nodded, her gaze soft as she looked at him. "You've made this place better, Naruto. And you've made us better, too." Storm's voice was filled with warmth as she spoke. "You've brought us together, Naruto. And you've shown us that no matter how difficult the path, we can always find a way forward together." Naruto felt his heart swell with affection for these incredible women who had become so important to him. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I'm ready to face it, as long as we're together." Jean, Emma, and Storm smiled, their hearts filled with the same warmth and affection that Naruto felt. They had all been through so much, but they had come out stronger, closer, and more united than ever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, the four of them stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the future that awaited them. It was a new dawn, a new beginning. And they were ready for whatever came next. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.